Welcome to our three-part webinar series on ArcGIS Pro Intelligence. This is part one of the series entitled What's New in ArcGIS Pro Intel. My name is Carl Walter. I'm the Director of Homeland Security Solutions at Esri, and I'll be facilitating today's session. Also participating with me in this webinar are the following folks. From Esri, we have Natalie Fairstein, who is the Product Lead Intelligence, Matt Funk and Eric Linz, who are both product engineers. And let's now get started with our technical demonstrations, and I'll turn things over to Matt and Eric.
Hello and welcome to the first in our webinar series for ArcGIS Pro Intelligence. I'm Matt and I'm an engineer on the ArcGIS Pro Intelligence team, and my co-presenter this morning is Eric, and he is also an engineer on the team. And today we're going to show you some of the new and improved capabilities in ArcGIS Pro Intelligence 2.8, which will be out sometime this month. So just so you're aware, throughout this webinar, Eric and I may refer to ArcGIS Pro Intelligence as Pro Intel. Now they both mean the same product, but sometimes it's easier to say Pro Intel, especially when you repeat it many times throughout the day. Since this is the first webinar in the series, we're going to talk about what's new for ArcGIS Pro Intelligence in the latest version. In the second and third sessions, we'll be diving into some more specific topics using Pro Intel. So next week's session will focus on investigative support, and the week after we'll cover link analysis. If you haven't done so already, please sign up for these sessions soon. But if you do miss them, don't worry, the videos will be posted for you to view later on. In this webinar, we're going to focus on the new features and updated functionality in ArcGIS Pro Intelligence for version 2.8. Now there's a lot more than we can actually cover in one single webinar, so we're going to highlight some of the most pertinent updates for improving productivity and getting more out of the data you have now. And after Eric and I wrap up the demonstrations, we're going to stop and answer your questions about what we've presented, or you can ask any Pro Intel related questions. You don't have to wait until the end of the session to begin asking questions. But before we start talking about what is new, let's take a step back and begin with a very short overview of what ArcGIS Pro Intelligence is and who it was made for. So ArcGIS Pro Intelligence was created to fill a gap between existing professional GIS systems and the needs of intelligence analysts who were using geospatially enabled data but did not need a full GIS system. The gap was a steep learning curve for an analyst who wanted to start making use of their existing data now but did not have the time to learn about GIS in the traditional way. So ArcGIS Pro Intelligence was engineered for the intelligence user first. ArcGIS Pro Intelligence is designed to visualize, explore, and analyze disparate data to produce actionable intelligence. It allows you to explore data from multiple sources and perform advanced analytics such as spatial, temporal, statistical, predictive, and relational. ArcGIS Pro Intelligence provides tools to directly connect to your data. Data can come from relational databases or web services or spreadsheets or even unstructured documents. Can then visualize that data in 2D or 3D maps, link charts, timelines, tables, and graphs. This allows you to ask complex questions of your data using a variety of analytical techniques to uncover patterns, trends, forecasts, correlations, and relationships. Users of ArcGIS Pro Intelligence are generally intelligence analysts. Well, we call them intelligence analysts, but that's a pretty broad description. They work within a wide range of job descriptions and organizations. Pro Intel sees use by law enforcement and crime analysts at all levels of government, professional analysts in both business and private organizations, and of course traditional civilian agencies and military units. But the main point is that they use geospatial technology but aren't necessarily GIS analysts. So when these analysts start ArcGIS Pro Intelligence, they should not expect the GIS experience in a GIS system. In fact, launching ArcGIS Pro Intel opens up the start page. Now, ProIntel organizes your work into projects, and the Start page puts these projects right up front. You can start a new project or open an existing one. You can also add custom templates to the Start page to make starting different types of projects for your organization faster. Within the project carousel at the very center, it's very easy to find and open recent projects. And additionally, you can even customize the Start page background to match your organization or agency's branding. Once your project is open, ArcGIS Pro Intel puts temporal, relational, and geospatial visualization into one single application. It combines link charts, 2D and 3D maps, and timelines together as needed. Now, data displayed in these views are linked together, so operations in one are reflected in the others. This means that you can work in multiple contexts at the same time, giving you greater insight into your data. And of course, ProIntel includes a lot of tools, but they're organized for an intelligence analyst. You won't see tools for parcel fabric management, feature extraction from point clouds, or watershed delineation. In fact, if you don't know what any of those things are, you can already forget about them. What we did with ProIntel was put the most common data analysis, editing, and distribution tools up front by putting them into the tabs on the different ribbons. And these tools that are presented to you change based on which views you're working in. So within a few clicks, you can import a folder of disparate types of data, you can create a new link chart, or you can share your results with your colleagues and other decision makers. Okay, so for the rest of our talk, we're going to switch over to doing some demonstrations and show you some of the new and improved capabilities of ArcGIS Pro Intelligence.
As part of the productivity improvements, a command search was added to help users find and execute commands without having to click through tabs or context menus looking for specific commands. When I click in the command search, you will see there are two lists displayed. The one on the top is a list of recently used commands. At the bottom is a list of suggested commands. Let's say I want to add another layer to the crime timeline. Instead of clicking on various tabs to find and execute the appropriate commands, I will use the command search. First, I'll type in add data because I'd like to add a new data set to the map. Now that my new data set has been added, I use command search, type in add layer to open the add layer to current timeline interface. Now I can choose the layer that was just added to the map. In a moment, we'll see that we now have a new layer added to our crime timeline. I can also open geoprocessing tools from command search. For example, I'll open up the batch import data tool. And not only can you find and execute commands and tools, but also search for and open help topics. If I was interested in finding more information about timelines, I'd simply type in timelines, and we have a new section here added to our command search results. And now I can select the topic that I'm interested in. Again, I did this all without having to click on various tabs to find and execute the commands. We've also made productivity improvements to maps. Here I have a layer of area codes with a few polygons selected, but which polygons are actually selected? The default outline symbol can make it hard to interpret the selection set when unselected features are surrounded by selected ones. A new selection option has been added to allow you to use a hatch pattern or solid fill for selected polygon features. I'll select hatch fill, and now we can easily interpret which polygons are selected. Have you ever had maps with lots of layers and needed to find the layers with definition queries? Prior to 2.8, you had to traverse the map contents and open the properties for each layer and check if it had a definition query. At 2.8, you can now filter the list of layers to to show only those layers with an active definition query. And for users who need to include screen captures in other applications, such as PowerPoint, we've made this task simpler. You can now take a screen capture of the visible extent by right-clicking on the map or scene and clicking Capture to Clipboard. Now I can paste that in another application. The Capture to Clipboard command is also available from the Disseminate tab. For timelines, we've added a refresh button. In previous releases, to refresh data in the timeline that has been updated, you would have had to delete and re-add the layer to the timeline. In 2.8, you just click refresh. For example, I have a timeline displaying crime data. I'll add a new bomb scare feature to the crime feature layer. Then I'll click refresh on the timeline view. In a moment, we'll see that the new feature has now been added to the timeline. We've also made performance improvements to standalone tables for faster loading, cell rendering, and increased stability. I have a table that has over 2 million records, and when I open the table, you can see the improvement in load performance. Performance of scrolling through the records, as well as across the fields, has also been improved. The experience of inserting new rows to standalone tables has been improved. You can now do this from the Table Views toolbar. This makes it much simpler to add data from other applications. I'll add new rows to the crime data table using the Insert Rows control and enter the number of rows I'd like to create. I have data already copied from an Excel spreadsheet in the clipboard, which I will paste into the new rows. Note that the selected row count in the standalone table is now displayed at the bottom of the map view, which is new at 2.8.
Okay, let's take a look at some of the updates we've made for link analysis and link charts in Pro Intel 2.8. So we spent quite a bit of time working on some of the back-end performance and redraw, but the demonstration I'm going to show you over the next couple of minutes are some of the things we've done to the interface and working with these link charts and creating new link charts. So here I have a fairly basic link chart that represents a series of Wikipedia articles. So I have some main topic articles and the references to other articles. So these are just, the internal links to other topics that you'll find in a typical Wikipedia article. So what I'd like to show you first is just looking at this link chart. It's not too complex, but I want to know a little bit more about what the size is. And it's we've put that into the lower left-hand corner. We've got some basic statistics about the size of this link chart. So we can see very quickly that it has 683 nodes and 1,129 links. So it's not necessarily a very large link chart, but it's still, we can see how many features are participating in this. So the next thing I'd like to point out is, we've got some of these main articles, and we've got some off of these, we've got some articles, some other topics that have one single link to them. So this is just a single reference. These really don't add to the visualization of this link chart, and I'd like to actually just hide them. So I can do that in Pro 2.8 with the Filter Links option on our diagram ribbon tab. So I turn on my minimum filter and I set the minimum number of links that a node must have in order to participate in this link chart. So since each one of these subtopics has only one link, I'm going to set my minimum to 2. So I can either type the number in or click the update. And now with my minimum filter of 2 set, all of those topics that had just one single link are now removed from my link chart. They're actually just hidden. They're not actually removed from the link chart. I can go ahead and uncheck that, and there they appear again. So again, I could go to do this again, and let's say a link, let me set this so I am going to show only topics that have 7 or more links. That's kind of the thing to remember about this is the minimum number of links that a node must have to be visualized in this link chart. So these are the remaining topics that have 7 or more links to them. So let's bump that back down again to 2. So I can see a few more of my topics. And there we go. And notice also that those statistics down in the lower left-hand corner have updated as well. So I've got about 152 of my original 638 nodes and 598 of my 1,129 links. Now this doesn't just affect the visualization of this link chart, this also affects the analysis. So let me turn off my filter and let's do a degree centrality on this link chart and take a look at the score of the top article. So right now the top article has a score of 419. This article happens to be of Gustav IV Adolf, I believe one of the kings of Sweden. So let's go ahead and close that up and let's put that filter back on. So again, we've removed any of the nodes that have less than 2 links connected to them. We're going to rerun that analysis and we'll see that the scoring has changed. In fact, it's a completely different article at the top and a completely different score. So the visualization will removing those nodes from the link chart, not actually remove, but hiding them with this filter also affects the analysis. Of course, I could unfilter those and bring those back and reuse that as the original link chart. So next I'd like to show you one small bit of being able to change how the link chart looks. So what I can do is I can now select a few of my topics in my link chart, my articles, move them off to the side, and I can now just change the layout of just that selected set. So any selection in my link chart, I can then go and redo that change layout on just that selection. So I could go ahead and select a few more. Let's move those around and change how these look. So let's go ahead and move those to top to bottom. Just changes that a little bit. So this gives me the ability to kind of customize and change what my link charts look like and how I've represented the display of these in any one section. Not just the whole link chart, but also now sections of it. Okay, the next thing I'd like to show you is going to be on stopping the redraw of very large link charts. So we spent a lot of time working on the back-end performance and making them draw faster, but still very large link charts can take time to redraw. So this link chart is a scaled up version of my previous link chart. So again, we're looking at Wikipedia articles and their referenced topics. I've changed the color of the links to this fluorescent green color just to highlight the nodes a little bit more, against the background of those links, so they stand out a bit more. So the problem we have is this isn't a huge link chart, but it's pretty big and still can take a few moments to redraw when I change the layout for the entire thing. And what I want to do is stop that as it's redrawn, because I don't want to wait for it to finish the redraw. I want to interact with this. You can imagine if this was an even larger link chart and it took even longer to draw, I might want to stop that. So how I'm going to do that is in the lower right hand corner, it's now a refresh button, but as we are changing the layout and the links and nodes are being redrawn, I can cancel that. It's going to be a stop button. So I'm going to have to do this pretty quickly. So I'm going to change from my current layout, which is hierarchic. I'm going to change to an organic layout and click that, and very quickly down in the lower right hand, change that. There we go. I've clicked it and it's canceled the redraw. So again, you can imagine, with a much larger link chart and you're changing the layout or moving things around and the redraw is just taking too long, you can stop that redraw at any point in time and still be able to interact with the link chart afterwards. Of course, I can refresh that and it will continue the draw. So I don't, if I want to, stop and pause it for a moment, stop that redraw, I can refresh it and it will continue the redraw as well. Okay, the next thing I'd like to show you is the ability to create entities using multiple key fields. So I'm going to start by creating a brand new link chart, an empty link chart. And let's take a look at my table I want to use to create this link chart from. In this case, it's a very simple, very basic table of US presidents as represented in the president's field. And in the second field, we have vice presidents that presided with each of their corresponding president. So what I would have to do initially is create entities from the president's field and then create a separate set of entities from the vice president field. So I'd have to run it twice. Well, with 2.8, we've combined this to be able to create entities from multiple fields. So I'm going to create my entities using this president's layer. And under choosing the fields, I can now choose president and also vice president. And this is going to create a node for each of the rows in both of these fields. Let's go ahead and give this a name. And we'll add those to that link chart. So let's go ahead and in this new link chart, let's turn on the labels. There we go. It's a little easier to see which ones are which. Okay, and so the next step, obviously, I want to create the relationships between the presidents and vice presidents. So I will do that here. And while I'm at it, I'm going to also add a default label to these links. So when I display links for the labels for the links, I'm going to have this label here. So president and spelling counts. Okay, so we specify that the relationship is going to come from the original entity table. I just have to define the source field as president and the target field is the vice president. And there we go. We now have representations of that. And let's turn on that default link. Oh, here we go. And turn on those labels. And here is our final link chart showing, president to vice president and so on and so forth. So again, I only used one set of entities in this link chart and I created it one single time from two separate fields, being the president's field and the vice president's field in one single table. Okay, so let's close this one up. And the last thing I'd like to show you is creating entities using a foreign key relationships. That is, using a separate table to define the relationships between entities. So let's go ahead and create a separate link chart, another one. And this time, let's look at a table of persons of interest in an investigation. So I've got a very simple table with a single field with just names of people in it. Okay, no relationships defined in this table at all. Those relationships between these people I want to display in this link chart are going to come from a separate table. So I've got this persons of interests table that has the from and to connections separate from the entities. So let's start by creating the entities in our link chart. Select our persons of interest. Label is going to come from the name field. We'll give it a POI name. Yep, there we go. We create those entities. Okay, there we go. We've got each of the 5 people in my original table. Let's actually turn on labels for them. There we go. A little bit easier to see who is who. Next, let's create the relationships between them. This time, source entities and target entities are in the same table. And I can set my default label. And next, I'm going to choose, instead of the relationships coming from the entities themselves, it's going to come from a foreign table. So I have to tell it which table this is going to come from. So this is going to be my POI connections table. Next, I identify in the source entity what the key field is and the target entity field. Then from that separate foreign key table, I have to choose the from or the source and then the from and the to target. So I'm defining that relationship using that separate table. And this gives me that connection between the entities and my persons of interest using the relationships in this POI connections table. And here I've got my resulting link chart, so on and so forth. Okay, next let's take a look at some of the improvements we've made for geoprocessing, including some new tools, some existing tools that have seen some improvements, and a few things you'll notice new in the framework with geoprocessing. So first, users of the Extract Locations pane will see a new tool that will help them create a gazetteer from a custom locator file. So the create location file from text file has been created to help you take a text file that was downloaded from geonames.org, the NGA GeoNet name server, or USGS Geographic Names Information Service, and turn it into a locator that can be used in the Extract Locations pane. So I've downloaded one such text file. And I'm going to convert that into a locator to use in the Extract Locations pane. This one comes from USGS Geographic Names Information Service. I have to give it the name of the locator file that I want to create. Tell it what types of features I'd like to pull from that file to create the locator, and then run that tool. While I'm doing this, I'll show you one of the improvements we've had in Geoprocessing UI. Previously, the dialog was one single object which contained all of the information for parameters, environments, and messaging. And we've separated those into tabs to kind of put these into a little bit more distinct categories of information, to put the most pertinent stuff right in front of you as it happens. So that locator file was created. I can now go to my Extract Locations pane. And on the properties, I can tell it to use that custom locator file that I've created. Let's make that one the active file. Switch back to our extract pane. And now we'll be able to use this locator to copy or take unstructured text and pull out geographic names from it into a brand new layer. This is a little more structured than you'd normally find, but for example, we should be able to find or locate each of the names of these cities. Once that location extraction is done, my features appear on my map. Next, let's take a look at an update to an existing tool. So the calculate geometry attributes is not new, but new for 2.8 is the ability to run the tool without creating a new field first. So say I've got my, my set of polygons here, and I want to know the square kilometer or I want to add the square kilometer footage or the square kilometer area to the attribute table. With calculate geometry attributes, I can do that. But I no longer need to specify a new field in the add fields before running this tool. I can do it as part of this tool. So I specify my input features, specify the new field name, and this is going to be an area property. Then I tell it the area unit, I want square kilometers, and I can use an alternate coordinate system if I'd like to. And I can run that tool. And there we go. I have my new attribute added. I did not have to add the field name before running the Calculate Geometry Features tool. For Pro Intel 2.8, we've added the ability in the batch import tool to be able to handle tables that contain MGRS, US National Grid, or single latitude longitude fields. So for example, I've got a CSV here that contains MGRS coordinates. I've got a few other tables in the folder that is contained by this that we're going to use for this. So I have a latitude, longitude, MGRS, and US National Grid CSVs as well. So I'm going to import these with batch import. So I specify my input table. I paste that into the dialog. I specify my target geodatabase. And I can run the tool. But I'll stop here and show you another new feature in ArcGIS Pro Intel 2.8. We have the ability, if you're a fan of the Python command line, we have the ability to copy the properties of running this geoprocessing tool and paste them into the command window without actually running the tool. So I could bring up my Python command window and paste the command with all the properties that I put into the dialog without actually have to running the batch import data tool. Let's switch back and run the tool from the dialog. Back in the dialog, I click Run. And the tool will import all of those CSV files and put them into my map as a single group layer, including the US National Grid, US MGRS, and the latitude longitude imports. One small improvement you'll notice as you go through some of the geoprocessing tools is we are constantly adding new tools to our capabilities. So what we've done is you will notice that certain tools will now include hints or clues to new tools that might enhance or provide new functionality. For example, if I go to the buffer tool, which is a fairly common tool, I've noticed that it now has a notice about a new tool, the pairwise buffer tool, which is an improvement over existing buffer in that it will now scale up for larger input data sets. It's just a small example of some of the things that we've done to improve the geoprocessing tools, add new tools, and update and improve the user interface in ArcGIS Pro Intelligence 2.8. Big data connections are collections of large or complex data sets that can be used together for visualization and analysis in ArcGIS Pro Intelligence. Now, what do I mean by big data? Well, I've got a selection of vessel tracks for January of 2020. These are downloaded as CSV files. So you can see I have one for each of the first 4 days in January. Now notice the size of these files is about 700 megabytes. That's pretty big for a CSV file, and it equates to about 7 million records per file for a total of about 28 million records. Now, I'd like to work with these as a single data set. They contain latitude, longitude data and a few other attributes as well. And I'd like to bring them in as a big data connection. Now, big data connections have been available in ArcGIS Pro Intelligence for a while. Up till now, they are created and connected to using geoanalytics tools such as the create big data connection, and you can modify them with the update big data connection set properties. But it's a sequence of tools that you have to use individually or create as part of a model. Well, for Pro 2.8, we've added a big data connection wizard. So I can create a connection by going to my data tab, connections, and select new big data connection. This gives me a wizard interface, which is a little bit easier to start up with. First, I give my big data connection a name. Then I point to the source data folder. In this case, I have to go to the parent folder containing my data. Then I can create the connection. Once the process completes, I can see I have my data set created. I click Next in the second pane of the wizard, and now I can modify my data set. I can also preview it with the preview button, which gives me a selection of the first few rows, and I can see my properties and my fields. Next, I can go to the properties of the data set, look at the fields and modify them, take a look at the geometry. It picks up any time fields, I can modify that as well as picks up properties on the CSV files that I have imported as part of this data connection. I could also set a filter, such as if I only wanted to work with a certain class of vessel. But I'm going to take this as all the defaults and finish that big data connection. Now, in my catalog pane of my project, I have my big data connection file, my BDC file. And here, I can add this to my map and start visualizing or analyzing this big data connection. For example, I could go to my Analysis tab and start working with Find Co-Travelers on this data set, or Classify Movement Events, or Find Dwell Locations.
The process of data engineering is where you transform, clean, and enrich your data in preparation for mapping and analysis. In ArcGIS Pro Intelligence, you can perform this process using various methods such as geoprocessing tools, charts, tables, and maps. At 2.8, a new data engineering view has been added to streamline this process. Here I have a feature layer of crime data for the year 2017 by zip code. Let's open this data in the data engineering view and look at some of the capabilities provided in this new view. I can open the data engineering view from the feature layer data tab or by right-clicking on the layer. A new data engineering view is opened, as well as a data engineering ribbon. Each layer has its own data engineering view, and multiple views can be opened at the same time. The data engineering view contains two panels, a fields panel on the left and a statistics panel on the right. The fields panel lists all the visible fields in the layer and displays a unique icon corresponding to the data type of the field. You can also specify which data types are displayed by using the filter button at the top of the panel. I can also search for specific fields using the Search Fields text box. From the fields list, I can update the symbology based on the values of the field. As I click the Update Symbology option on a field, the symbology updates in the map. This allows you to quickly visualize how values are distributed in space and whether any places are missing data. From the field list, I can also create charts which help reveal patterns, trends, relationships, and structure in the data. The chart type is based on the field data type, and I can also create charts based on multiple fields. You can also view statistics for fields in your data. You can add one field at a time or multiple fields at once in the statistics panel. Just right-click and select Add to Statistics and Calculate. Alternatively, I can add the fields separately to the table and then click Calculate. Various statistics are calculated, such as minimum, maximum, mean, skewness, and kurtosis, just to name a few. Included in these statistics is a chart preview showing a visual representation of the distribution of values in the field. The statistic table is also interactive, so you can right-click in cells and access functionality applicable to that field. The same geoprocessing tools when you interact with the statistics table are also available from the Data Engineering tab. While this has been a quick demo, I hope it has spurred interest in using the new Data Engineering view in your next project.
Okay, thanks Matt and Eric for that short overview of Pro Intel and the updates on some of the new features. And we've got time for a couple questions. If we do not get to your question, we will respond to you via email based on your email that you registered with. Question number one for Matt and Eric. Is there documentation outlining which features are unique to Pro Intel versus ArcGIS Pro?
Okay, I think I can answer this one. And the answer is it's very kind of simply no. That would be quite an exhaustive list because the two applications share the very similar robust code base. So generally speaking, they start off as the same background information, but are presented very differently for different communities of users. So Pro is generally designed for GIS professionals and Pro Intel for intelligence professionals. So there's a lot of overlap, but they are presented very differently. So trying to come up with what's in one, what's in the other would be almost would be very hard to come up with.
All righty, next question. Can an entity have multiple properties?
Okay, I think this is in regards to the link charts again. And yeah, basically, that whatever you import with your entity, the presentation, we had some just very basic ones with just the ID field. But yeah, you can have multiple fields associated with entities.
Okay, is there an additional extension for ArcGIS Pro that you would need to license, or is it already included in ArcGIS Pro?
I can take that one. There's no additional license required. While Pro Intel is a unique application, it shares the same installer and the same licensing that ArcGIS Pro does, but there's no additional license you need.
Okay, and our last question, and keep in mind if you did it, we have a couple questions we're not going to have time to get to. We'll respond by email. Our last one will be, how long will it take to import the 28 million records?
Okay. Yeah, so we're not actually importing those records. This is going back to the big data connection section. We're not actually importing those records. The big data connection is simply a reference to those data sets, to those, in that case, the CSVs. Now, a single big data connection can actually reference more than just one set of CSVs or shapefiles or other data sets. So we're not actually importing, we're just making a reference to them and deciding how we want to create literally the connection to those data sets. Now, when we actually use those data sets, that's where we might see or incur a slowdown or a reference to however many. I want to say for creating that connection for the 28 million that I used, it took from a few seconds to possibly a minute to just reference them, and then draw them took a little bit longer.
Okay, Matt and Eric, thank you very much for your answers and for your updates. And we are about ready to close down. Just a couple parting comments here. If you enjoyed today's session, we hope you did. There will be a survey that automatically pops up when you exit out of the webinar. If you guys could fill that out, that would be great. There's two really key questions that I'm really interested in, and that's our ability to answer additional questions. We won't contact you directly unless you ask us to contact you, and we gave you two sort of different options this time. If you are having account problems or licensing questions or technical questions, there's a box for you to check. But if you also just want to talk about tradecraft and mission and workflows, we can have a different group of subject matter experts call you back and just literally talk shop. Don't forget that part 2 and part 3 are May 19th at 10 a.m. West Coast, and part 3 link analysis May 26th, also at 10 a.m. West Coast. And we're going to close down for now. I hope you folks enjoyed it, and we'll get back to you next week, same time. Thanks.